Well, it's a privilege to be back. Honorable Governor of the State of Sierra, honorable ministers, distinguished guests, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, this is a memorable day. As you know, the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification and this conference share a unique history. The first ICID in 1992 was instrumental to the outcomes of the Rio Earth Summit. It provided the building blocks for the negotiation that led to the Desertification Convention. Now, as then, the second ICID is preparing the input on dry land issues for the Rio +20 summit to be held in 2012. And today, this conference will also be the launching pad for a decade to highlight the critical role that the drylands play on our planet. So, what, in concrete terms, will be the legacy of ICID +18? In his message to this conference, the United Nations Secretary General has set for us a vivid picture of where the global community stands at a crossroad with two paths. The path of business as usual will worsen the speed of degradation with devastating impact on livelihoods, families, and communities, and will further cause more extension of life and jeopardize the future of humanity. The alternative path is the one that will embrace and undertake the formidable challenges of sustainability, implying that we choose to channel our collective effort and action towards it. By organizing this ICID +18, Brazil is setting an example. Although renowned for its tropical forest, close to 16% of Brazil is dryland, which is home to 19% of the country's population. By hosting ICID conferences and the launch of the decade, Brazil is making the point that the drylands matters too and are important global assets for human well-being and security. As you know, the world's drylands covers over 40% of the Earth's land surface. With more lands around the world facing increasing degradation, the United Nations General Assembly considered it crucial to mount a decade-long campaign for deserts and the fight against desertification so that their value becomes embedded in our psyche. So, what if dryland did not exist? Will it matter? This is a provocative question that I hear often. So let me give a straightforward answer to it. Without drylands, the global food situation will be different, to say the least. Imagine a world without 50% of the world's livestock. Imagine that 44% of all the world's cultivated systems no longer exist or existed in some other location. Where might be that location? And what will be the effect? Now imagine that common foods such as bread that come from wheat, which is indigenous to dryland, did not exist. Stretch this thought further, because it is not just bread that we will miss. At least 1/3 of the crops under cultivation today will not exist. Now, picture further what this will be by 2050, when the world's population is over 9 billion. That will be part of the scenario without dry land. What is significant is that it is the scenario we are willingly unfolding as we degrade and abandon the dry land. Land degradation is a global phenomenon, but it is known as desertification when it takes place in the dry land. It is reflected in a deterioration of the soil quality. Land is a finite resource, but its degradation is tolerated because we do not know for sure how fast it is occurring and where. We underestimate greatly, and ignorance and misperceptions about dry lands persist. This is where conferences such as this one and the Decade campaign come in. Scientists and experts must provide the data and information that will also serve as ammunition for all arid land stakeholders to campaign in order to generate a paradigm shift to change the heart and minds of the public and of policy and decision makers. A key focus of the Decade campaign then must be getting rid of prevailing misperceptions and ignorance about dry lands at all levels. The ignorance that takes dry land to be wastelands, marginal areas, or liabilities, and the misperception of desertification as a merely local and not global concern. Among these conference participants are prominent stakeholders of dry land issues. So let me question again. What will be the legacy of this conference? What will be the legacy of ICID plus 18? In my view, we should be measured by the extent to which we will contribute to the building of a new paradigm, one that repositions land issues where they belong, higher on national and global development agenda, with dry lands viewed as assets and not liabilities in the global vision of sustainability and a prerequisite for achieving the Millennium Development Goals. The convergence of ICID plus 18 and launch of the Decade 2010-2020 for desert and the fight against desertification is not just another happy coincidence. Our aim is to forge a global partnership to reverse and prevent desertification and land degradation and to mitigate the effects of drought in affected areas in order to support poverty reduction and environmental sustainability. The Decade is an opportunity to foster policies and action that will improve the livelihoods of affected populations and the conditions of their ecosystems and to generate global benefit. But the vision will remain words on paper without effective and concrete financial assistance, capacity building, and technology transfer. These are the pillars of international cooperation. In this regard, and on behalf of the 5 United Nations agencies spearheading the event of the Decade, allow me to thank the government of Brazil and its various agencies for the financial and in-kind contribution they have provided, which has made this conference and the Decade launch successes, and to particularly acknowledge the contribution of the governor and people of the state of Ceará. Thank you very much for your contribution. Allow me also to recognize the importance of the contribution of individuals creating partnerships through the example of Professor Antonio Magalhães, the director of ICID plus 18. His dedication to a successful conference and outcome is commendable and deserves our gratitude. I also wish to thank Bank Nordeste for its support in publishing the awareness-raising material that will be used for the launches here and elsewhere in other regions of the world. The role of the private sector for progress in the drylands cannot be overemphasized. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, as a lesson learned from the fight against the dust bowl, a severe dust storm phenomenon caused by severe drought coupled with decades of failing farming practices that caused major and durable ecological damages to the US and Canadian grasslands in the 1930s. President Roosevelt once said, "A nation that destroys its soil destroys itself," unquote. History has taught us that this is true not only for nations, but for civilization also. Let us not be the generation that jeopardizes the heritage of future generations by degrading any land. The decade is an occasion for all stakeholders to take the mantle of its vision and walk the talk. It begins with those of us gathered here today to carry the message globally. So allow me to hand the floor back to the Master of Ceremony to guide us in a participatory ceremony to launch the UN Decade for Desert and the fight against desertification. Thank you.